You're watching NBC10's Race in Philly, a partnership with the Philadelphia Tribune.
A major step forward in efforts to stop the spread of the coronavirus. The vaccine rollout is underway across the U.S. And while some see this as a breakthrough, others are hesitant to get it.
I cannot say that I have a level of comfort.
Tonight, we explore the role of race in Philly when it comes to getting the facts about the vaccine and the struggle to make sure everyone has access.
Plus, the role of race in sports. 76ers head coach Doc Rivers making a push for more inclusion when it comes to hiring in the NBA.
A league played by a lot of black players, it should be coached more by some black coaches.
And shining the light on the Afro-Latino community. The steps being taken here in the Philadelphia region to celebrate their culture and heritage. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Race in Philly. I'm Jacqueline London.
And I'm Jim Rosenfield. And we begin with the question being asked by many households during this pandemic. Is it safe to take one of the coronavirus vaccines? As
NBC10's Brandon Hudson explains, the concern is especially valid in the black community because of a history of mistrust of doctors.
It's a sign of new hope during the pandemic, the first approved COVID vaccines. But some Philadelphians aren't quite ready to take the shot. How do you feel about taking the vaccine?
Well, you know, as an African American, it brings up a lot of bad feelings because it's so soon.
I cannot say, because of the national conversation and how highly politicized this whole thing has been, I cannot say that I have a level of comfort.
Dr. Alan Waller, pastor of Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church, was one of the first faith leaders to bring widespread COVID testing to his community. He's not ready to do the same for the vaccine yet.
What is this going to do to our bodies 10 years from now? And are we going to take this year? We already know it's twice. Will it be twice next year? Is this how we're going to live for the rest of our lives?
The Tuskegee syphilis experiment, the Holmesburg prison experiments are just two examples of why some African Americans don't blindly trust a COVID vaccine.
So what do you tell Big Mama? What do you tell Grandma? What do you tell Aunt, Uncle, Grandpa? What do you tell them to give them peace of mind?
Well, we tell people that we understand that these things have happened in the past, but we don't want to allow the past to predict our future and our present.
Dr. Delana Wardlaw will be the first to tell you about the challenge of vaccinating people in underserved neighborhoods. A survey shows only 14% of blacks believe the vaccine will work safely. Dr. Ayla Stanford also understands the concern. She found the Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium, which brought testing to communities of color. Ultimately, she decided to roll up her sleeve.
Your risk of getting the vaccine is less than your risk for getting coronavirus disease.
Another challenge is making sure people in underserved neighborhoods get fair access to doses.
What we will need is for our health department to really take a look at the statistics around the city of Philadelphia and see which neighborhoods are being affected at the most disproportionate levels.
COVID continues to affect blacks and Latinos at a disproportionate rate. So far, we've seen black women like Dr. Stanford become the first to set an example. Nurse Sandra Lindsay was the first American to get a COVID vaccine, and nurse manager Rosetta Oliver was one of the first in Camden.
Trusted messages have to come from trusted sources. So you go to providers that you trust. You use sites that people are used to going to, and they talk to people they have a relationship. They talk to people who look like them and who also got the shot.
Although the fight against the pandemic still goes on, the vaccine brings us closer to winning the battle and the war. Brandon Hudson, NBC10 News.
Sixers head coach Doc Rivers has been outspoken about race relations in this country.
Rivers didn't mince words when reacting to rioters breaching the U.S. Capitol and storming into the building earlier this month.
When you saw the protests in the summer, and you saw the riots, or more the police and the National Guard and the Army, and then you see this and you saw nothing. You know, it basically proves the point about a privileged life, you know, in a lot of ways. You know, I'll say it because I don't think a lot of people want to. Could you imagine today if those were all black people? storming the Capitol and what would have happened, you know? So that, to me, is a picture that's worth 1,000 words for all of us.
Rivers is also outspoken about the changes he wants to see within the NBA.
As NBC Sports Philadelphia's Danny Pommel's found out, Rivers wants more diversity when it comes to coaching staffs.
Doc Rivers is one of the most accomplished head coaches in NBA history. He's also one of the most outspoken when it comes to mending the division in this country regarding race. And he believes the time is now to make some real change.
I think it's the most important window of my lifetime for us, because it's been talked about more, but this is the first time you actually think it has legs. And there already has been change. You see change in advertising already. You see more inclusion.
More inclusion in advertising, but Doc would like to see more inclusion when it comes to hiring in the NBA. For all of its diversity among its players, he is one of just 5 African-American head coaches in the league, and he'd like to see more.
It's a league played by a lot of black players. It should be coached more by some black coaches. You know, there's a lot of guys, in my opinion, that have deserved jobs. There's a lot of guys that have coached and had one opportunity, and you never hear from them again, that we should have heard from them again. So we can do better.
Doing better in this regard isn't just a statement for Doc. It's a movement. He's a member on the board of the NBA's newly formed Social Justice Coalition, a task force that aims to use the league's voice to expand equality, not just in their communities, but nationwide.
This board that I'm on, I look at it as something that will last forever, long past us, you know, and our work can continue. Different guys will continually be on the board. We just got to stay with it. We got to stay involved. And I'm really, of all the things that the league did, I would say that was the one that I thought was the most important, because that will have a legacy to it.
For NBC10, I'm Danny Pommel's, NBC Sports Philadelphia.
Examining mass incarceration from the perspective of current and former inmates. How the issue is now the focus of an exhibit in Philly.
You're watching NBC10's Race in Philly, a partnership with the Philadelphia Tribune.
Dealing with the justice system and mass incarceration through the eyes of those currently or formerly behind bars. That's the focus of an exhibit at the African American Museum in Center City.
NBC10's Anya Lachelle got an up-close look at the dozens of works currently on display.
Rendering Justice is on view virtually at the African American Museum and looks at the issues of mass incarceration through the lens of people who were once in prison and some who still are.
Looking at the injustices that are just systemic and embedded in the prison system is something that these artists are looking at and talking about in their work.
The museum partnered with Mural Arts to include original works from Reimagining Reentry Fellows, a mentorship program to support formerly incarcerated artists.
It's important to note that they're artists, and this show really drives that home. You really do have to recognize their humanity first.
Philadelphia icon and scholar Deborah Willis teamed up with several artists in the program for this photography series to help shake the stigma of a mugshot.
Absolutely trying to change the narrative. This is the work of Titus Kaffar and Reginald Dwayne Betts.
It's called Declaration Redaction Series. The artists worked with inmates at SCI Phoenix to redact text from the Declaration of Independence, leaving behind only words that resonated with them.
It's the fall of America,
North Philly native Mary Baxter gave birth to her now 13-year-old son while in handcuffs. Her video presentation, The Fall of America, uses hip-hop to tell her story.
I tried to draw the historic parallels of Black subjugation, of all of the state-sanctioned violence that Black bodies endure.
Baxter, who had a previous criminal record, was arrested in 2007 for 2 older cases of marijuana distribution. She was sent to Center County Correctional Facility.
I was arrested at age 25 on the day that I turned 9 months pregnant, being shackled to the bed for 43 hours while in labor with my first and only child. Had a tremendous impact on my psyche.
How long were you incarcerated for?
I was incarcerated for 7 months. So the first 7 months of my son's life, I was not there.
And now she's sharing her story through her art and activism.
What do you hope audiences take away when they see this exhibit, when they see your work?
I would want them to know that, the people that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution.
I hope that after seeing this exhibition that people will want to get involved in the reform.
Audiences can get an in-depth virtual tour of the African American Museum on its website, along with additional programming.
You can find a link to the virtual tour on the NBC10 app. Instilling pride while educating at the same time. How members of the Afro-Latino community are helping children celebrate their culture and heritage.
You're watching NBC10's Race in Philly, a partnership with the Philadelphia Tribune.
As we continue to see a push for more visibility and representation for communities of color, local families are taking steps to make sure Afro-Latino culture and heritage is not only seen but celebrated.
NBC10's Miguel Martinez-Valle shows us how they're creating content to educate others.
A is for Africa, where our roots begin.
A es para África, donde comienza nuestra raíz.
Every night, the Faña Ruizes read their children bedtime stories.
C is for Celia Cruz, the queen of salsa.
But while Joey and Amaya learn their ABCs, they also learn about themselves.
I wanted to make sure that at least my kids know that, hey, there's a book out there that you can read in both languages, that you can learn about yourself and you can learn about your history.
Kara and her husband Jose started writing the Afro-Latino ABC alphabet during the pandemic.
He came with the perspective of coming here from the Dominican Republic and not being able to see himself in books or have access to a lot of children's books in Spanish at that time. And I came from the perspective of an educator.
Kara now hopes their alphabet and her other children's book, Black Girls Are, will inspire other families and educators to celebrate who they are.
All children should be able to see themselves represented in a loving and respectful manner in the books that they read.
As their family looks to celebrate Afro-Latinos through literature, El Taller Puertorriqueño in Philly looks to do so through art.
We present artists whose work is very connected to their African heritage through music like bomba.
The Taller has been using art like Henry Bermudez's Wilderness in Mind exhibit to encourage honest conversations around colorism and racism for 25 years.
For a long time, we've been sustaining these conversations. We've not shied away from them. You know, the events of last year make those choices even more poignant.
Last year's pandemic and civil rights demonstrations further highlighted inequalities all around us. So now more than ever, they're looking forward to continuing to support Afro-Latino work and conversations around race and colorism in this new year.
The reason for having conversations about race is to really look at ourselves, each one of us, and analyze what are the things that we are doing that either contribute or interfere with our ability to move forward.
Miguel Martinez-Valle, NBC10 News.
Honoring the legacy of a civil rights icon through service. How this year's tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is focusing on the challenge of stopping the spread of the coronavirus.
watching NBC10's Race in Philly, a partnership with the Philadelphia Tribune.
The fight against the pandemic will play a key role in this year's Greater Philadelphia Martin Luther King Day of Service. One of the major projects will include coronavirus testing for underserved communities. Organizers announced the plans during a virtual event. Girard College will serve as the region's signature project site. That's where the Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium will lead a drive-through and walk-in testing site at the Fairmount campus. The president of Girard College said it's important to address health disparities in communities of color.
Here at Girard College, we work with vulnerable students and families every day and see firsthand the challenges faced by people of color when it comes to accessing quality health care. The current crisis has only magnified the racial and social injustice that impacts countless communities across our nation.
The Day of Service will also involve food distributions and several virtual events, including a career exploration expo. We're learning more about the Philadelphia Tribune's plans to pay tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
I spoke to Irv Randolph, the managing editor of the Tribune. What is the theme this year?
The theme this year is King and the role of the Black church in the civil rights movement, both past and present. We're looking at how King's faith drove his activism and the role of the church in the movement.
Has to be a fascinating examination. Why did you decide to look at Dr. King and the Black church for this supplement?
Well, I think to have a better understanding of King, every year we try to look at a different way to, around his birthday, to look at King and the movement, the civil rights movement, and to have a better understanding of the man and his work and his legacy. And to have a better understanding of King, you have to look at his faith, which was played such a central role in his life and his activism, fueling his, giving him inspiration and guidance. What was his faith that was so central. Look at many of his speeches, his books, his letters from the Birmingham jail. You see the role of his Christian faith in his movement and in his philosophy and his approach to what he did.
The Tribune is also examining the past and present role of the Black church in the social justice movement, right?
Yes, yes. So we always want to look in the past, but also see how it relates to the future. Is that as the movement carrying on till today? Who are the faith leaders of the day that are carrying on that same mission today? I think the readers will be surprised to find out that there are many that are continuing the movement. Of course, they're not as well known as King. King was one of a kind of someone in his generation, a generational leader, a transformational leader. But there are others who are continuing the movement, some on a more local level, and others on a national level. Why did they have a different view and had this broader perspective of their faith and how it fueled their activism? So we're looking at that. We're looking at his time at Crozer Theological Seminary right here in Chester, where he attended school. We'll look at that, at African American women in the church and also in the civil rights movement. Again, also, as I said before, we're looking at the faith leaders of today and what is the movement of today.
That's it for this edition of Race in Philly. I'm Jim Rosenfield.
I'm Jacqueline London. Thank you for joining us and have a good evening.